Hey there, it's Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me. If you're watching on YouTube, smash the like button like you're Brandon Davies. You have consent, and if you haven't yet subscribed to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel, also do that while you're here. Okay, let's get into it. The 2023 NBA draft is now just 8 days away. In anticipation of this, we've done episodes that have touched on many of the top prospects: Victor Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson, and Brandon Miller, the Thompson twins, Jarris Walker, Anthony Black, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Cason Wallace. We touch on all of them. Today, we want to focus on two players who are arguably the most surprising prospects, who are both expected by most to go in the first round, perhaps even in the top 20 of the draft. And that is Taylor Hendricks from UCF and Brice Sensabaugh from Ohio State. And the reason those two are arguably the most surprising prospects expected to go in the first round is because both are one-and-done players who were ranked outside of the top 80 of their high school class. Taylor Hendricks was number 84 in the class of 2022, according to the top 247. Brice Sensabaugh was number 86 in the class of 2002, according to the top 247. How did they go from that in 2022 to likely first-round picks in 2023? I'll ask Norlander next, but first, a word from our partners.
They say patience is a virtue, but for some things, we can't wait.
All right, Deadleg, how did Taylor Hendricks and Brice Sensabaugh go from sub-80 prospects to one-and-done possible first-round picks? Make sense of it.
Different paths, but same origin. What do these players have in common? Trivia time.
Oh, what do they have in common?
What do they have in common? What do these two players have in common?
They're both taller than me.
That is correct. No, I mean, that applies to... We had to actually do out the planet. What percentage of the planet is taller than Gary Parrish? I'm going to say 77%.
Yeah. It's just basically everybody except Danny DeVito.
Okay. Well, it's not just.
I would post Danny DeVito up. No problem.
You would.
Day.
He's got no chance in the paint against you. There's no question. They played for the same grassroots team. They were teammates, each one teach one, and they have gone to be one-and-done players, as GP mentioned there, because
do you remember seeing them at all on the grassroots?
No, because this would have been COVID, so I did not see this.
I don't remember seeing either one of them.
Yeah, this was 21, and actually, so there is a chance that I would have seen them because I did go to Peach Jam, but I don't remember seeing them.
Yeah, that was the Peach Jam we went to where you had to wear a mask in the gym, right?
Yeah, and we're like, 10 teams caught COVID, and
yes. Like we talked about Jalen Hood-Schifino on a last draft episode. He tested positive for COVID at that Peach Jam.
Yes, that's right.
And had to leave Team Thad. So we were there. I guess this is probably true. We saw them, Brice Sensabaugh and Taylor Hendricks, just probably don't remember seeing them.
Yeah, Dylan Mitchell was also on that team. And so, in fact, Sensabaugh was the more renowned player at that level for sure. But these guys being one-and-doners is what makes them interesting stories, because there are other guys, and we'll talk about these other guys when we're going to do a mock draft pod before we have the draft here. But Kobe Buffkin was 96, Chris Murray was 89, Marcus Sasser and Ricky Council 88 coming out of their respective classes. Max Prosser was 94, Jaime Jaquez was 92, and Colby Jones was 91. All of those players will get drafted. Most of them will get drafted second round or late first round, but these two players, GP said, likely to be picked first round. Taylor Hendricks is almost certainly going to go in the lottery. Sensabaugh has a very healthy chance of being a top 20 pick after just one-and-done seasons. Who do you like more, out of curiosity? Do you like Sensabaugh or Hendricks more?
I think Hendricks, and most people seem to think Hendricks is the better prospect at this point. He's a 6'8", 6'9", bouncy, athletic forward who was terrific at UCF in his one season. 15.1 points, 7 rebounds, 1.7 blocks, 1.4 assists. Block percentage was like 6.2, which ranked top 95 in the country. And he largely, blocked shots without getting into foul trouble too often. Shot, and this is the key, 39.4% from three on 4.6 attempts per game. Also shot 78.2% from the free throw line. So, I mean, he's a 6'8", 6'9" combo forward who might be able to play three positions at times in the NBA. He could play on the wing, play a stretch four, or maybe like a small ball five, and he can reliably knock down shots from three. I mean, he's a 6'8" athlete who can reliably knock down shots from three. Like those guys get drafted pretty high. I've seen him as high as 6 in some mock drafts. I have him just outside the top 10, but I acknowledge I might be low on that.
I don't think you are low. I'm going to have my annual big board mock draft next week, and where I try and forecast who the top 30 players will be from a given draft when we look up in 5-10 years from now. I won't have Hendricks in the top 10. I don't think he will play much small ball 5 in the NBA. I think his questions with rebounding are a major reason why. His story is very interesting. I did the feature on Anthony Black. I almost did one on Taylor as well, but it was kind of similar. Not exactly. They are definitely not A to A, apple to apples. But I kind of did that story last year on Jalen Williams, who went from, and he wasn't a one-time player, but he went from obscurity out of Santa Clara to lottery pick to, oh, by the way, he was a top 5 rookie this past season. So it was a little bit of the same genre, but I am intrigued by it. He was a package deal essentially with his brother Tyler.
Right.
I believe, I don't know if you remember this or not, but I want to say that Memphis was actually pretty involved in his recruitment.
He had an offer from Memphis.
Yeah.
I
don't think
had
Memphis
an
wanted
offer
them
from
both, though. I don't think they wanted to take the package.
Yeah, that's the thing. So it's interesting you say you almost did a profile on Taylor Hendricks, because like I went looking for them. There's not I say this respectfully. If there is one, I just couldn't find it. There's not like, great, here's Taylor Hendricks. There's no equivalent to your Anthony Black story.
Right.
Taylor Hendricks that I could find. But the backstory is that he was obviously the better prospect than his twin. UCF offered both of them, and he's from Fort Lauderdale, so stay in the state of Florida and play with your twin brother. But he did have offers from Memphis, LSU, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest, Florida State. Also had like a couple of Ivy League offers. Penn and Yale, I think, were in there. So that suggests on some level he's a pretty sharp young man as well.
I think so. He's also, I think, in this position because of a confluence of events. So one of them, I think a major one being that UCF was a bit plagued by injuries last season. Like UCF was a slightly above average college basketball team that we might have mentioned twice last season, even like, barely, right? They went 19-15, won a game in the NIT. Hendricks was a good player. And because of his performances early in the season, which was enabled in part by former 5-star recruit who's a senior this past season, CJ Walker. He was hurt most of the season. And then there were other guys in the front court that occasionally missed time. And it allowed Hendricks to really, I think, take on a bigger role than he was maybe even anticipating. There was no anticipation that he was going to be an NBA pick after one season, not even after 2 seasons, but he's ahead of the pace. Because of that, his story is a bit intriguing, and I'm curious as to what he's going to be at the next level, because he is ahead of the pace. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. He's got a 7'1" wingspan. I find him to be a pretty durable power forward type, and while he will be asked to guard multiple positions, if he makes it, he's going to have to play multiple positions. I almost wonder if he winds up being primarily a 4, and where that lands him, because he is a good athlete who I think is in this position of like 7 to 12 draft range, because he is a plus defender and will be expected to be a plus defender in short order at the NBA level. He, I think, understands the concepts well, has the body type and durability to give himself a good chance at sticking, but he will be asked and tasked with being a really, really good utility defender. And so much of his value to me, now he's a good shooter, don't get me wrong, but I think so much of his value is going to stem from what he does on the defensive end. And I think that is what has led NBA teams to hold him in such high regard, because I think a lot of teams that are interested in that lottery range think he can fill a role, not as a do-it-all defender, but a do-it-most defender, I think is fair to say, and he can adapt in a variety of schemes. So he's a good shooter, not a chucker. His O rating was 119.9. Like, it's definitely there. I would say maybe he even is a too comfortable to slightly settling, trying to get shots from the outside, because he's not as reliable on the interior. But that's almost to be expected. He's, again, Parrish, he's interesting because he's ahead of the pace. And
Right.
so with some of his flaws and drawbacks, it's like, well, yeah, that's not surprising. He had an opportunity. He absolutely seized it. And I'm not quite sure what to expect of him at the next level. Could he be a top 10 player of this draft? Obviously, that's possible. Could we look up in 5 years and see that he was drafted 20 spots too early? I actually think that is something that is on the board here with Taylor Hendricks.
Yeah. The reason we packaged Sensabaugh and Hendricks together is because, again, they're both sub-80 prospects in their high school class, according to the top 247, who are now one and done, possible first round draft picks. And I only say possible just because, there's no doubt Taylor Hendricks is going in the first round. He's probably going in the lottery. I think Sensabaugh is a first rounder as well, but Jonathan Gavoni just updated his mock draft at ESPN this morning, and he has now Sensabaugh in the second round of his mock. There's some a couple of knee injuries in high school that could be problematic. Like if you're evaluating all aspects of a prospect, yes. He has a history of knee.
I think that's why he was rated so. GP, I think if he doesn't have the knee injury, I think he would have been a clear-cut top 50 prospect. I actually think that's why he's even subject on this pod right now.
I was talking with Chris Vernon about this, who of course works with me here in Memphis, but also hosts the Ringer, an NBA Ringer, a podcast for the Ringer. And he made note, and I guess I knew this, but I'd never really looked at it. Typically, if you look at the high school rankings from 1 year out, it looks a lot like the mock drafts. Like the number one, number two, like Chet Holmgren, Paolo Banchero, they were all up there, right? If you look at this one, Nick Smith was ranked number 1 in the class of 2022. He's now a possible lottery pick, but probably not a top 10 guy. Derek Lively was number 2, possible lottery pick, but probably not a top 10 guy. Dariq Whitehead was number 3. Maybe a first round pick, but could slip into the second round. Kyle Filipowski was number 4. He's back in school. Cason Wallace was number 5. Probably not a top 10 pick, but maybe. Gigi Jackson was number 6. Definitely not a top 10 pick. Maybe not even a first round pick. Kelly Ware was number 7.
Transferred now at Indiana from Morgan.
Dylan Mitchell was number 8. Couldn't play.
Yeah.
Keontae George was number 9. That lines up about where he's, in that range. Amari Bailey was number 10. Might not go in the first round. Probable second round pick. The point is, that's not usually the way this looks. Now, in fairness,
what's the reason? And now? Hold on.
Okay, I'll tell you.
Okay, go ahead.
Scoot Henderson should have been a part of this class.
Well, sure.
He would have probably been number 1 in the class, right? Thompson twins could have been in this class. Mm-hmm. So, in a different world, you're looking at the class of 2000. You're looking at the class of 2022, and it's like Scoot is 1, Thompson twins are 2 and 3. It starts to look a little better. You also had reclassifications that impact this. Jalen Duren was supposed to be a part of that class, if I got it right. Yeah. And Amani Bates was supposed to be a part of this class, although who knows how that would have ended up. So I think that's a possible explanation for why it looks a little unusual, but it does look a little unusual. This is not usually the way it is. Just to hammer home the point, you go to the class of 2021, number 1 was Chet Holmgren. Number 2 was Paolo Banchero. Number 3 was Shaden Sharp. Number 4 was Jaden Hardy. Number 5 was Jalen Duren. Jabari Smith was in the top 10. Peyton Watson was in the top 10. So that lines up a little more the way it normally does. This class of 2022 is a little bit all over the place.
Yeah, no, that is aberrational and very interesting. Also, by the way, shouts to Chris Vernon. Heavily endorsed my Anthony Black profile.
Oh,
Didn't
he's
get
a
much
big fan.
out
He
of
brought
Gary
it up.
Parrish, but it's good to know that someone in the Memphis media is reading my stuff and endorsing that stuff.
He
So
brought it. I was in studio with him last Friday. He couldn't stop talking about it.
really?
Oh, he's a big fan. I think it's his favorite thing he's read about any NBA draft prospect. I mean that sincerely.
Yeah, no, he was very kind to endorse that, and I appreciate that from Chris Vernon. All right, real quick, back onto Hendricks here. Some of the cons against him, if you will, and then we'll get into Sensabaugh because he is pretty fascinating as well. And I could see Sensabaugh being the better player ultimately at the NBA level. That wouldn't surprise me. Hendricks and watching, and I had to catch up on video with some of this stuff because I watched UCF play. I was looking at the schedule last night. It was a handful at best. They just were not a relevant team, and so I caught up with a little bit of video. Rebounding wise, he's not as good as he should be. But again, like he's probably where he would be expected to be after 1 year as a freshman in college basketball. But you turn this on its head, he's suddenly an NBA prospect and a lottery prospect. There are going to be some major drawbacks with all of that, and I think rebounding is a growth area. And I think if teams are going to be taking whatever team takes him in that, again, I'm putting him 7 to 12 range. I find it unlikely he goes before 7. It's unthinkable. Maybe he drops a bit out there, but lottery pick, right? I think that they will draft him expecting him to grow as a rebounder and as someone who can be a little bit more reliable near and around the rim on both ends. So that's something to keep an eye on. And then while he's a good shooter, he's not like this. He doesn't have an all-around offensive game. He's not a big playmaking guy or creating guy, which isn't, he's a power wing, but there are just, I think some of the drawbacks are a bit glaring. Be interested to see how quickly he adapts on that end. You like him more than Sensabaugh. I think I like Sensabaugh slightly a little bit more. Sensabaugh averaged 16.3 points, 5.4 rebounds, shot 48% from the field, 40.5% from three, 83% from the line, and was on the all Big Ten freshman team, as GP mentioned before, with the knee issues. I think that was a factor in him being ranked where he was. He was by no means like a clear-cut 5-star prospect, but yet again, we have a one-and-done player out of Ohio State. That's been something of a trope here for many years. But Holtman has been able to do it, although you haven't had the on-court success to match some of that. But yeah, Ohio State's coming off its worst season in 25 years, but it really wasn't because of Sensabaugh. I mean, he was a bit of a ball hog. I mean, he took 509 shots in 33 games. There were very few freshmen that were more high volume than him, but I think it was validated. Like, he's got a confident shooting stroke. He usually would take the right shot, can shoot from mid-range, shoots from deep, doesn't need the dribble to do it. Seems largely unbothered by taking a shot with the hand in his face. I wonder if that actually changes at the next level, though. But he's 6'6", around 235 pounds. And I think he is one of the best combinations of having good strength. Like, he's got some brawn to his game. He's got a little bit of velvety touch sometimes in his game. And he is, I think, can be one of the better defensive. I mean, I guess he already is, but he is among the better defensive rebounding guards / wings in this year's draft. Like, I think Sensabaugh has a better knack for rebounding right now than even Hendricks. But there are some weaknesses, which we can get to in a second. But what's your overall read on Sensabaugh? And I'm guessing you would put a first round grade on him, even if there's some slight doubt over whether he will be there by pick 30.
I think he's one of the 30 best players in this draft. It was noticeable that Gavoni dropped him into the 30s. And listen, Jonathan's great. He's talking to franchises every day. If he did that for a reason. And it's probably because he's hearing something that is causing problems with front office's confidence in Sensabaugh as as a first round pick. But take that, set it aside. I like him. He's 6'6", got the 7'2" wingspan, and the numbers were 16.3 points, 5.4 rebounds, 1.2 assists per game. Shot above 40% from three on more than 4 attempts per game. Also 83% free throw shooter. So that lines up. The shooting is going to be there. But it was big numbers and like rock solid numbers, but for a not great team, as you noted. And those meniscus injuries in high school, like those can take a toll. And I wonder if franchises are not liking what they see, or hear from that perspective. If that could be an explanation for why he, at least in one prominent mock draft, has slipped pretty considerably. At one point, most people seem to have him projected as a likely lottery pick. And now at least one prominent NBA draft analyst thinks he's not going in the top 30. That's interesting. Yeah,
it could be the medical, but there could be 1 or 2 teams lying in wait that are hoping that's the case, and they think they get him well ahead of that. It wouldn't surprise me. If you're
it is also worth noting, it was reported, I think, by Jonathan yesterday that 19 players have been invited to the green room. Brice Sensabaugh is not one of them.
Yeah, let's hopefully max out on that. Because the more you go into that, no one wants to be invited to the green room, and then you're still sitting there at 25, let alone going to the second round. So that's fair. And the NBA is trying its best to go off of obviously mock drafts, but also check in with front offices. And while no one wants to give their secrets, just get an indication of like, all right, what's the biggest number that's also the safest number here. And so there is something to that. Although every so often you do get a player that's not invited to the green room that gets taken, 4 or 5 with 4 or 5 guys sitting there. That's possible. Maybe Sensabaugh will be in that group. But if you want to knock him, yeah, I think sometimes he squeezes the orange to lift a phrase from our colleague Clark Kellogg. I think he needs to, and I think he will have no choice. Like he did what he did out of necessity at Ohio State. They needed him as much as he was, as high volume of a player as he was. They needed that, and even still, it didn't change much about Ohio State's season last year. But he'll need to ditch those tendencies. He can't be so ball dominant, and he's also not where he needs to be remotely as a one-on-one defender, someone guarding the ball, particularly like with his size. And this is something I got from a couple of NBA people when talking about him. He is not as far along as he should be on that end. Will need to be a deep study on team defensive concepts, elaborate switching. He has serious defensive limitations right now. So it will very much be a situational situation when he gets drafted and where he goes, because there will be some teams that look at him and say, what he does, we already have that in guy A, player B, and guy C, and other teams might have a spot there as a backup or a third option. But you can clearly see that he is too big and theoretically too physical to be as much of a project on defense as he is right now. But as a reminder, like Hendricks, these were not top 30, top 50, top 70 prospects coming out of high school. They're going to have certain flaws. It's why they are not, clear-cut top 5 picks. They're just going to be improvement areas. Those are the ones with Sensabaugh. And, if you can step in and actually play some competent team defense, it's going to help your draft stock. That is the case with Hendricks. It is not the case with Sensabaugh. Yeah, the defensive stuff is another obvious area of improvement. Like if you're looking for the negatives, it's the history of knee injuries and what he was defensively at Ohio State. If he is not, and it's always, when you start evaluating prospects, with just about any one and done guy, you can talk about needs to get better defensively. They all need to get better not all, but like most need to get better defensively. That's a pretty common thing, but clearly like he's got to be better or else he'll get attacked in the NBA. I mean, they'll just hunt you over and over again at that level. And if you can't guard your position, they'll take advantage of you. So I'm not saying he can't improve, but he does need to improve. Though he was a sub-80 prospect in the class of
2022. I will say I was talking to an agent in like late November, early December. Like he jumped on radars pretty quickly.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Like an agent was like, it's a typical conversation. Hey, who have you seen? Who do you like? That kind of stuff. And the agent said to me, I did not bring him up. The agent said, the guy who's like, I'm really impressed with is Brice Sensabaugh at Ohio State. He said he was targeting him. He did not get him. But he said, I've told my guys, go out and let's go try to get Brice Sensabaugh. He said, if he stays in school 2 years, he'll be a lottery pick. He obviously decided not to stay in school for 2 years, but he'll still get picked some way. He'll be on a guaranteed contract, next year. No question about that.
I remember being at the UConn Xavier game and talking to 2 different NBA scouts who were there and talking about the guys on the floor. And for whatever reason, one of them brought up Sensabaugh as well. I can't remember why. But at that point, one of the scouts was like, yeah, there's no chance he's staying. I think at that point, I remember him saying he should be a borderline lottery pick, which at that point it felt like it, but now it feels like it's a little bit further down the road. It'll be interesting to see when we look up in a few years where these 2 players compare against each other and the other guys as well. And we're not going to do a deep dive on him here, but Bufkin, he was a major riser as a second-year player this year. Again, was 96 in his class. You see what Keegan Murray has been able to do at the NBA level. Chris Murray obviously has good draft projectables. Will he follow a similar path to his brother in terms of stepping into the league and being an immediate player? We'll see. We love Sasser at the college level. He was 88th in his class. We talked about Anthony Black in a recent episode. There are 4 Arkansas players in this crop. Ricky Council committed to Wichita State. He was 88th. Omax Prosper was one of the biggest winners of the combine there. There will be, and then I mentioned Jaime Jaquez, Colby Jones out of Xavier. There will be at least, I think, 2 of those players that hop one of these 2 guys. But right now, Hendricks is in a good spot. Wouldn't surprise me if the place he goes to ultimately is the subject of a trade, be it before the draft or on draft night. Wouldn't be surprised by that whatsoever. Also, in talking to some NBA people in the past couple of days, a lot of buzz and curiosity over how much movement there will actually be within the top 10. One front office person I spoke to felt pretty confident that there's going to be at least 2 trades within the top 10, which to me is a bit surprising, only because I mentioned this on a previous episode. The Scoop versus Brandon Miller thing is intriguing. Wemby just going 1, like this is going to be the Wembanyama draft. That's what we're going to remember this for. But beyond that, while there will be good players taken in the top 10, I don't find a ton of enticement here. And the idea that there would be teams maneuvering to get into this top 10, I find to be intriguing because I just don't think this year's top 10, and I would include Hendricks in that crop there if indeed he goes there, GP, is as loaded or as promising as some other recent drafts there. But just, a little additional scuttle here as we are 8 days out from the NBA draft with a number of intriguing prospects. But I don't know. The more I look, I think, how about this? I think Hendricks will be a good fit, good role player. I think Sensabaugh has the better chance to ultimately be like a top 3 scoring option and therefore has a little more value down the road. So I would narrowly, long term, I would put more value on Sensabaugh than Hendricks, but I might be in the minority on that.
In my latest mock draft that's posted at cbssports.com, I have Taylor Hendricks going. Where do I have Taylor Hendricks going? I believe 12th to Oklahoma City. And then I had Sensabaugh going 17th to the Lakers. So I've got them both in the top 20. But the truth is I might end up being a little low on Taylor Hendricks and a little high on Brice Sensabaugh. But as always, we'll see.
That's right.
We'll see.
Mock draft early next week. Yeah, you got to know that show. Yeah, we're gonna do a mock draft next week.
Are we?
That's on the budget. We got to. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think I'm gonna rally Kyle Boone. Did we get Boone and Vicini on a mock draft? Can you even handle that?
I don't know about a 4-person podcast. That's not really my speed. That's not really what I enjoy.
All right.
I don't
mix
know
it
if
up.
I
We'll
don't
see if we
know
can get
if
to Sam at some point. So
yeah. I don't know about that. I tell you, by the time we get to the NBA draft, I am ready for it to be over.
I know.
I'm so tired of talking about these guys. I hate talking about these guys this way. The most interesting thing about an NBA draft is you spend, if you're me or Sam or Kyle, you spend months talking about these people. And then a year from now, I won't even know what some of them are doing. Like you just look up and they're like on bad teams, not playing. Come next Friday morning, most of these guys we've spent the past months talking about, we will never talk about again. Unless they're trivia time.
We're a college basketball podcast, so that makes sense. Yeah.
I don't know if we are. Okay. I don't know if that's true.
Sometimes.
For sure. Sometimes. All right. Let's call that a show.
Sounds good.
Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Huck and Larnell. Thank you guys for watching, listening to Iron College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Rate it, review it. There's more of us than there are of them. Yep. That needs to be reflected in the comments. So if you're not subscribed, please go do that, and we will talk to you again real soon. Till then, take care.